Trump goes on offense against BLM. New York City teachers bring coffins and guillotines to protest. Governor Cuomo is begging wealthy New Yorkers to come back to NYC. Updates on the massive explosion in Lebanon. And Kindergarten Cop is canceled. Welcome, everybody, to the Buck Sexton Show. Great to have you here. I cannot believe that each passing day now gets us deeper into August and closer to this election, which is going to certainly be the most intense election cycle, I think, in memory, and the most bizarre for sure, considering there's really no rallies, there's no live events, there's no conventions to speak of, there's maybe not even going to be any debates. That's something we're going to have to get ready for. Oh, no, they're saying, Joe Biden's going to show up. They're telling us that. I'm not convinced. If I were Joe Biden, I wouldn't show up. In fact, I don't understand why Biden feels any need to really do much of anything other than softball interviews with the lib media that's desperate to help him get elected. Why take a risk? Right? It's just anti-Trump voting they're going for. No one is going to be inspired by Joe Biden. I saw a meme making the rounds on the internet last night about how about a computer that had, I think, like 8 bits of memory storage or something like that. And it looked like what you might have seen if you're my age when you were a very, very young kid. And the meme was, this is a computer from when Joe Biden started in the United States Senate. Just to give you a sense of how long this dude has been in the Senate and doing what he does. But you have Biden, who's very convinced, at least he seems convinced, of his own destiny here, that he is going to be the president of the United States. Everyone's also saying that it's going to be Susan Rice or Kamala Harris as his VP. I don't think it really makes all that much difference which one of them, quite honestly, is the VP. It checks the boxes. It manages to do what the left wants, putting a younger female minority individual on the ticket. But Biden, in a classic moment, I want you to hear the whole thing because I want to start off today on a little bit of a different vibe. Here's Biden when he's doing an interview with CBS. And if you're a CBS reporter, you know that your job hangs in the balance if you make Joe Biden look bad, right? I mean, you're not going to advance at all at CBS, NBC, ABC, any of these places unless you are giving Joe Biden the equivalent of a verbal shiatsu massage every time. That's tough to say real fast. Every time you are interviewing him, or perhaps a Swedish massage. I don't even know really what the difference is between these things. But you have to be very, very nice to Biden in the interviews. But it doesn't matter because he's Joe Biden and he's going to start, he's going to start saying things kind of just loud and scattershot. And yeah, here he is. When asked the question whether he's taken a cognitive test, he lets us know that no, he has not taken the test, to which I automatically want to respond, oh, we know, Joe, you have not taken a cognitive test, and we don't really need to see the results because we already know them. Here he is, play clip 5.
Have you taken a cognitive test?
No, I haven't taken a test. Why the hell would I take a test? Come on, man. That's like saying before you got in this program, if you take a test where you're taking cocaine or not, what do you think, huh? Are you a junkie?
What do you say to President Trump, who brags about his test and makes your mental state an issue for voters?
Well, if he can't figure out the difference between an elephant and a lion, I don't know what the hell he's talking about. Did you watch that? Look, come on, man. I know you're trying to goad me, but, I'm so forward-looking to have an opportunity to sit with the president or stand with the president in debates. There's going to be plenty of time. And by the way, as I joke with him, I shouldn't say it. I'm going to say something I probably shouldn't say. Anyway, I am very willing to let the American public judge my physical and mental my physical as well as my mental fitness.
What? Look, every time the guy gives an interview, there's a pretty good chance he's going to have one of these moments. They always say that Trump, they make fun of the way that Trump speaks, but those are his mannerisms. That's the way that the president communicates. And for a lot of us, we understand what he's saying. One of the media's favorite games that they play is taking every single word that Trump says literally, not allowing him any figurative leeway, not understanding what's clear exaggeration. The president said this, and they all freak out. And then with Biden, they act like, yeah, that gibberish that he just spouted, real statesman-like. And they all nod their heads like the bleating sheep in unison that they are. So there's that. And then on the other side of things, you've got the president who's out there, I think, now beginning more than ever, more than what we've seen so far, the counter-strike that I've been talking about for a while. The left hit him with everything they had in June and July, but here's the problem that they're going to have going forward. BLM is a political liability in states that are purple, where there are independent voters, and where the Democrat Party needs to try to convince folks in the suburbs, people in areas of the country that are deindustrialized because of offshoring all of our jobs to China, that they need to convince them that the Democrat Party is a sane steward of the American economy. They're not going to be able to do that when they're also telling them, oh, yeah, BLM has been great for America. It has not been great for America. That's putting it mildly. It's made everything worse for everyone, as I've said, and that's just true. We're seeing all those facts and figures come back right now. But they also have to deal with the possibility that the numbers are going to continue to go down in Florida, Arizona, Texas, that they are now on the other side of this curve. And we may now be getting to a place, unless you really believe that New York City has magically become fantastic in its handling of COVID-19, that's, I suppose, possible. Much more likely is that the disease spreads through a population until there's relative herd immunity, and then it still is out there, but it does not have the same pandemic exponential spread capability. If we're on the other side of that, and Trump is on offense against the left and really taking the fight to them, look, I think Joe Biden and the entire Biden campaign, the Democrat Party going in to this election cycle, I think they've got a glass jaw. It's just a question of, are we going to take a big swing? Trump, I was happy to see this morning, my buddy Pete Hegseth hosting on Fox and Friends. Trump called in and spoke some important truths about the BLM movement. Play clip, the one with Trump.
And Black Lives Matter. Nobody's done better for our black community than me. Nobody, and that is, with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln, it's true. Criminal justice reform, opportunity zones, best employment numbers in history. Every single, what I've done, funding the black colleges and universities, historically, they say historically black, but the colleges and universities funded it for a long time. They had no funding. They had to keep coming back to Washington. I took care of them for long term. They're all set. Nobody's done for the black community, African-American community, what I've done.
Now, I understand the libs are all going to freak out about this, and Trump comparing himself to Lincoln is going to be considered sacrilege. And as I've said before, the president, he's a salesman and he exaggerates a bit. But here's what he's doing that they hate. And this is getting us back into Trump's X factor, the thing that he did that other Republicans didn't do or weren't willing to do. He does not allow the left to dictate the terms of debate. Instead of, a month or two ago, it was, and this is where I think the president was going wrong. He was extending his hand to the other side to talk about criminal justice reform with an executive order, and they slapped it away because it's not about criminal justice reform. It's about power. And the president referred to BLM as a bunch of Marxists, which is true. The organizers of this movement, the people that were behind this from its beginnings, have come out and said very openly that they are Marxists. So why can't we understand that for what it is? Why can't we speak openly about this? Because they've already said it. So now this should be a part of the discussion. What are they really trying to do for America? The president, though, needs to go back to, and I think he will because this is who he is, the Trump that will not be contained. that will not be told you have to speak about it this way. You have to. I don't want the political consultants in his ears. I don't want people getting in his face to tell him we need a more moderate tone because of all the trouble the country's had right now. The president needs to let it rip. He needs to let it rip. He needs to go on offense because the other side is already firing everything they've got. They are scorched earth. They are nuclear option. Whatever they can do, they're going to do. So you do not do yourself any favors in a political contest like that, where you're holding back because you think that maybe that will make you look a little more magnanimous or statesmanlike or whatever it may be. I'm not saying Trump should just fly off the handle entirely. Sometimes I think his tweets, look, the guy, if you're a barroom brawler and you're throwing big punches, sometimes you're going to miss. And you might hit your fist in the wall and hurt yourself, right? I mean, that can happen too. But I'm happy to see the president feels like he's got some of the fight back in him. Feels like he sees now what the pathway forward is against Joe Biden, the Democrats, and the whole campaign here. And he's also calling out all the stuff going on with these professional sports leagues, which, look, I wish I could tell you that I'm going to boycott them. But as producer Mark rightly points out, I mean, I haven't watched any of these leagues in a long time. But here's the president saying, look, it's disgraceful what they're doing. Let's just call it out. Play 15.
A couple of years ago, you were very vocal about kneeling for the national anthem. Now it seems that standing is the new kneeling, in that only 3 players in the NBA, Jonathan Isaac, Myers Leonard, and a coach, Greg Popovich, are actually standing for our nation's anthem. Your take on the state of the league?
I think it's disgraceful. We work with them. We work with them very hard, trying to get them open. I was pushing them to get open, and then I see everybody kneeling when during the anthem. It's not acceptable to me. When I see them kneeling, I just turn off the game. I have no interest in the game. And let me tell you, there's plenty of other people out there too.
That's the right move. The old school GOP would have gone into something about, well, they're entitled to their opinions, and I understand the history of blah, blah. No. You're showing disrespect to the national anthem. This all started because of that crybaby Colin Kaepernick, who was on the downslope of his career, who reinvented himself as some kind of social justice hero. And now this is all just caught on. But I'm sorry, we don't have to be okay with this either. We're also allowed to have opinions. We're also allowed to express thoughts on the patriotic, pro-American side of the equation. That's allowed too. And that's what we need. We need a president that is taking the fight ideologically to the other side, using that tornado of energy that he has. I mean, it's like nothing else I've ever seen in somebody his age. When he gets fired up, when he's really going, he's a one-man political machine. And we need him out there making the case across the board in as many venues as he can, given the limitations imposed on him by the lockdown libs, right, and by the panic that is still ripping across this country, unfortunately. I can't believe we're losing our house that we didn't even sell. That's what Deborah said when she found out that she was the victim of home title theft, which is a crime that can cost you your home. Here's how it works. The bad guys can find your information online. They can forge your signature and then claim that you sold your home to them. Sometimes you won't even find out about this until the eviction notice arrives. You've got to protect yourself right now, and the way to do that is with Home Title Lock. Home Title Lock creates a virtual barrier around your home's title. You can go right now to HometitleLock.com and use promo code BUCK to find out if you're already a victim of this crime, and you can also get 30 free days of protection. Go now. Don't wait until it's too late. Go to HometitleLock.com, use promo code BUCK for 30 free days of protection, and to see if you're already a victim of home title theft. Again, take action now. HometitleLock.com, promo code BUCK.
There's never been two candidates or two philosophies, let's say, that are more different than what we have. I mean, we want law and order. We want strong police. We're not defunding the police. We probably could say we're doing the opposite of defunding the police. You look at Portland, that's all radical left Democrat. They want every city to be like a Portland. If we didn't go out to Portland, they've done a great job.
Right.
Just a very small group. If we didn't go out to Portland, they would have knocked down and burned down the post office, which is a $500 million, the federal building, the courthouse, and the post office, and anything else federal. You know, we didn't go just for the courthouse. We went for every federal building there because they weren't protecting it. They were unable to protect it. But we got it to a point where it's reasonable, and if we have to do something more, we'll do more. We have to straighten out that city. It's been a mess for years, run by radical liberal Democrats.
Don't assume that your opponents, your enemies, have a brilliant plan and know what they're doing. Right? Don't underestimate them. Don't overestimate them either. The Democrats saw an opportunity with BLM to mobilize their base, to put the Trump team on defense, to undermine security in cities across the country in a way that would then be, they would try to blame on the Trump administration. But it's now looking like it's too obvious. The numbers, the homicide numbers in particular, Chicago, New York, many cities, 36 out of 50 of the top U.S. cities in the country, big spikes, at least double digits in homicides. And with homicides come all the other violent crimes, too. So this is now a liability for Democrats. That's what the Trump team, that's what Trump himself, I think, is focusing in on. And it's going to be very difficult for Joe Biden and all these down ballot Democrats, too, all these other Democrats running in the congressional races and for Senate races, to explain how it's okay that their party is the party that supports, quote, protesters who are really rioters, who, as we see here, are responsible for 113 eye injuries from lasers shot at them in Portland alone in the last few weeks. I'm just going to say this. If somebody messes with my eyes, if someone tried to blind me, I would use extreme force at my disposal to stop that from happening. And I would not feel badly about it. Someone's going to try to blind you for the rest of your life. Definitely a baton to the head for that, if not more. I wouldn't mess around with that. That's really a form of malicious wounding through technology. You know, it's disgusting that these protesters do it. Remember, you fire a laser up at a helicopter or a plane, you can go to prison for, I think it's 5, it might even be 10 years, federal prison. It's a federal crime, as it should be. Cause a crash very easily, completely disorient the pilot and blind him. We think it's no big deal to do that to federal officers? Absolutely unacceptable. The Democrats are the party of the people trying to blind police officers. That should be the ad we run across the country. These are all Democrats doing it and Democrats supporting it. Let's not get too caught up in the terminology. Oh, it's Antifa, leftist, Marxist, socialist. You know, we're not in a philosophy 101 class here, folks. We're in a political street fight. These are Democrats who are out there trying to burn down courthouses in Portland. They're Democrats who are creating these autonomous zones in places like Seattle. And the people looting and rioting in the streets of whether it's New York or Fort Wayne, Indiana, or other smaller cities that people don't even think about as being subject to this. Minneapolis, obviously, the beginnings of all of this. When you look at who's doing this, it's all on Democrat hands, just making everything worse for everyone. Instead of being the party of adult thinking and seriousness and coming up with solutions, they're the party of whine, cry, and trash whatever you want. Just complain. The party of childishness. That is the Democrat Party. And I think the president and his allies are in a strong position now to make that case, especially as their favorite thing to just terrify everybody about COVID. If the numbers continue to go down in those states that are the hardest hit, and by September, we're in a place where it's clear we're on the other side of that curve. Oh, and they're going to tell you it's masks and mitigation. I can tell you that right now. That's what they're going to say. No, it's not. It's just not. But we don't have to get into that argument right now. What is it that the Democrats are willing to say about the worst offenders from within their ranks? And I was talking about Antifa. What would they say about it? Ted Cruz held a hearing on this in the Senate. Some interesting answers came from it. So what do the supposedly serious Democrats in power think about their most insane supporters? Right? Do they disavow them? Do they criticize them? do they have any problem with the paramilitary wing of the Democrat Party operating as it does? Senator Cruz held a hearing about this. And first he wanted to know, he asked Ken Cuccinelli, who's the number 2 at DHS, who we had on the show, I don't know, a week or two ago now, asked him about what the terminology, specific terminology that Democrat politicians, I'm not talking about random people living in mom's basement, writing the comments section of the Huffington Post, or HuffPost as it's called now. I'm talking about what do the people that are supposed to be leading the Democrat Party say about all this stuff. And here's what they say. Things like stormtroopers and Gestapo when talking about our federal law enforcement officers. Remember, James Comey, the greatest man in the history of the world, according to libs, because he was on an insane jihad, a lanky weirdo's jihad against Trump. And now federal officers are stormtroopers and Gestapo. Senator Cruz asked Ken Cuccinelli about this. Play clip 6.
Speaker Pelosi and another senior House Democrat have referred to federal law enforcement officers working for the Department of Homeland Security as stormtroopers and Gestapo. Are there any stormtroopers or Gestapo working for DHS right now?
No, Mr. Chairman, they're not, and it's an extremely negative and hyperbolic libel by those individuals on people who are doing their duty as professionally as they can, not just in Portland, but around the country, protecting, including those of us in this building.
Yeah. That should be pretty straightforward, right? You'd be thinking, how does anyone disagree with this? How could anyone have a problem? These people are nuts, right? Antifa are lunatics. They're losers. They destroy things. They attack people. They'll attack journalists. Unless the journalist does their bidding, which a lot of journalists do. They hate Andy Ngo out on the West Coast so much because Andy just shows what they're doing. Oh, you'd think, wouldn't you, that given all the journalistic resources out there of these major media organizations, that they'd have a whole lot more worthwhile footage to show of the kind of stuff that Antifa does. But no, we have to go to Andy Ngo to see the truth. Why is that? Because the Democrats in the media are running cover for their paramilitary wing, which is Antifa, right? They're most hardcore activists. They're most devoted peeps. So that's what's going on here, right? That's what we see happening. You have Representative Ayanna Pressley defending Antifa members. Play 7.
As we have seen with movements, they will try to co-opt it and undermine it and sanitize it and whitewash it. But the Black Lives Matter activists that are today called Antifa were in the 1960s being called communists, okay? They were just as disruptive and agitating the status quo and just as impatient.
So we're going to pretend that Antifa really are anti-fascists? Is that the game now? We're going to say that Antifa, where's the fascism they're fighting against? The Trump administration? Right, the Trump administration that keeps saying they want people to go back to living their lives and making their own decisions and having freedom to move, to open their businesses, to visit relatives, to see loved ones, to not be choking themselves with a face diaper all the time, right? Isn't that okay? That's fascism now? No. This is very George Orwell's 1984. In that it is the inversion of truth for the purposes of propaganda, right? The Antifa are the fascists. They want to control everything. The people that are running around trying to burn down federal courthouses, they just want to undermine the system enough that they can take control of it, don't you see? That's the point. They're not trying to burn it all down to the ground and then have a state of total anarchy because their political opponents are the ones that have a whole lot of guns, right? They know that. They're not going to try to control red state America by bringing down the entire federal government. What do they want? They want control of that federal apparatus. They attack in it to weaken it for political purposes so then they can seize control of it, their side, their party. Antifa wants Joe Biden to win. They don't actually want anarchy, right? That's what I think everyone needs to understand. This is the game they're playing. It's intentionally separated out. It's intentionally supposed to be confusing. Wait, they're they're anarchists, but they're anti-fascists, and they say it's like World War II all over again, and they're fighting Nazi Germany. No. They're just attacking the edifice of the state right now to create disunity, to undermine its ability to protect us, to make people think that there's no point in voting, to make people think there's no point in having Trump in charge. Can't defend cities, can't defend courthouses. Demoralize your opponents. And then you bring in the leftist overlords. Then you bring in the people that are going to tell you what to do all the time. That's the strategy. This is all part of the Democrat seizure of power that they're planning this fall. These are separate efforts as part of the same overall movement. And if you wanted to see just how unwilling they are to speak the truth about this, or even just to openly criticize the Antifa, which should be so easy. Why would anyone not do that? Here's Mazie Hirono. I do think the dumbest member of Congress, and I think that's fair. I think she's the least intellectually capable member of the United States Congress. There are some others that are close. I'm not going to say that she's far and away, but certainly the dumbest senator. I think Congress is too much. The dumbest senator. There are dumber people in the Congress. But here she is when she's asked about this, and Ted Cruz is having his hearing. She doesn't want the hearing to go on. She doesn't want to hear about Antifa. Play clip 4.
So I hope this is the end of this hearing, Mr. Chairman, and that we don't have to listen to any more of your rhetorical speeches. Thank you very much. I'm leaving.
Well, I appreciate the, as always, kind and uplifting words of Senator Hirono.
Thank you.
And I would also note that throughout her remarks, she still did not say a negative word about Antifa, nor has any Democrat here. They instead engage in a political game where they depend. You're welcome to say something negative about Antifa right now.
I think that I've covered the subject quite well. You are not listening.
Okay, she declined to speak, so that is the position of the Democratic Party. I would note also that of the 7 Democratic senators who spoke, not a one of them apologized for or denounced multiple Democrats calling law enforcement officers Nazis, stormtroopers, and Gestapo. To be fair, I have not heard the word Nazi, but stormtrooper was Nancy Pelosi and Gestapo was another Democratic leader.
This is really meaningful. I know that there's so much that can get lost in the political back and forth, and, is this just partisan gamesmanship? And it's meaningful that the Democrats have embraced an anti-law enforcement position, because it's a culmination of their overall rejection of objective truth and their moral relativism. They don't think that the law can just be enforced as the law. The law has to be enforced within a political context that they are constantly making and remaking to suit their whims in the moment. Right? The law is inherently problematic. Criminal law specifically is inherently problematic for the Democrat left-wing mentality, in which we see them distorting it and destroying it and undermining basic principles of it. I mean, whether they're pretending that the presumption of innocence no longer counts for anything in the Kavanaugh hearing, or trying to tear down a federal courthouse, actually destroy the courthouse itself, they will undermine any aspects of the law, because the law is an impediment to their goals and their designs on this society. A law that is equally enforced and that is applicable to all of us and that we all have to live under, and that can be understood as it is written, that statutes have real meaning, not just a collection of words that can be reinterpreted into meaninglessness or into something that they don't say. That's all a problem for the Democrat mentality. Remember, they believe in moral relativism. Break it down, take it to its philosophical roots. They believe in moral relativism. They believe that there is no such thing as eternal and universal truth. They reject natural law. They reject individual rights as divinely endowed. No, it's all from the state. Whoever controls the government controls you, controls everything. That's their view. That's their worldview. They're not going to back away from this. That's not going to change. And if that's how you view things, why would you undermine Antifa? They're very useful in creating chaos that can then be exploited. What could be easier than saying people who are rioting night after night, 2 months straight in a major American city, and are doing so partially under the banner of the BLM movement, partially under the banner of Antifa and the Democrat shock troops. There are all and then the moms against whatever cops or whatever they're calling themselves now. All this nonsense that these libs do. It should be so straightforward to condemn this outrageous behavior, but also these violations of law. And they won't do it. They will not. Democrats will not do this because they know that if they open that up, then all of a sudden there may be requests. Well, what about this other group that was looting and rioting and destroying? What about the BLM movement up to this point? They allow their minions, their shock troops, to go out there and intimidate people and get all angry and put this stuff on social media and make it seem like there's a much bigger movement of radical leftism in this country when it comes to the average American than there really is, all because it benefits the Democrat Party. So they're not going to stop any of that. They're not going to have a problem with it. They're not going to say a word about it. Republicans are the ones who unnecessarily apologize for their team, apologize for us. Oh, we shouldn't have done this. Oh, we're so sorry. Democrats never do that. Never, ever do that. And I think we're all starting to see more and more why that is, especially in this election cycle. Oh, and there's one more Mazie Hirono moment right before she walked out of the Ted Cruz hearing that I want you to hear. Play clip 10.
And now there are all these attacks about Black Lives Matter and what they're saying. I mean, how many of us even think that defunding police departments should be taken literally? I mean, I certainly don't. So, we have this pesky thing called freedom of speech. And I'd say that the people who support Black Lives Matter, and if they're calling for various boycotts and all that, that's called freedom of speech. And that's what this hearing title is. Protecting speech. So all I can say is, look, we should all join hands and denouncing and whatever words you want to use about violent extremism of all stripes. And I think we can all agree on that. So to constantly accuse Democrats of not caring about that is really, I can only say that you aren't listening.
Denounce violent extremism of all stripes. Okay, what about the specific violent extremism that has been defining the Democrat Party's movement and re-election prospects for 2020? How about that? No, not going to talk about it. Notice how Democrats, when they want to talk about Black Lives Matter, if you bring up Blue Lives Matter or All Lives Matter, you're horrible, we're focused on this. And then when you want to talk about Antifa and what they're doing, it's everything, right? It's all violent extremism. So there's no consistency. There never will be any consistency with them because they're frauds. They're frauds, and they're pushing what is effectively now a morally and intellectually bankrupt ideology on the United States. I would not have said that about the Democratic Party 20 years ago. That's where the Democratic Party is today. It thrives on abortion, racial division, socialism, state control of every aspect of your life, climate change worship, and what else do you want to throw in there? Nothing good. There's nothing the Democrats offer up where I'm like, yeah, you know what? That would make my life better. Good stuff. Oh, the free health care that's not really free, that's actually just a tax on a lot of working people to give to some other people in order to have everybody have subpar, mediocre at best health care. I'm not looking forward to that. Not rushing out to get more of that. Nothing the Democrats offer up right now as a major part of their platform. They're not even for putting America first. They're not even for limiting U.S. military interventions or continued occupations overseas anymore. They're just for whatever Trump is against. That's it. They're just in opposition to the party that says, hey, look, life is not perfect. Politicians not perfect. Let's do the best we can based on reason, logic, history, and the law. That seems pretty good lodestar to me, right? Not the Democrats. Make it all up as you go along. Relativism, 100%. That's the plan. That's what they offer you. Oh, and just when you thought it couldn't get any dumber among the Democrats these days, guess who weighs in? Joe Scarborough, really among the biggest frauds. It's like the Lincoln Project created a TV news anchor, right? I mean, it's like they made him in a lab. He weighs in on Trump's Axios interview, which Trump was, hammered by the media for this. And here's what Scarborough adds in the mix. Play 14.
Donald Trump cannot even say that John Lewis was an impressive man. And he brought up repeatedly this poor, tortured, twisted soul brought up repeatedly that John Lewis did not attend his inauguration 4 years ago. So as this American icon, this American angel, our saint, as John Meacham calls him, is lying in state, Donald Trump can't even say anything nice about him. Is that because he's extraordinarily small, or he's still sending signals out to white nationalists like David Duke, who say that his election was great for America?
Probably a combination of both.
All right. They're going to start talking about David Duke. David Duke only exists in the minds of Democrats at election time to attack Republicans. It's the most consistent thing you could ever see in American politics. Every election cycle, Democrats and their lackeys like Scarborough, doing whatever the Democrats tell them for a paycheck, they will bring up David Duke again. You never hear about this guy except at election time to attack Republicans. And now we're going to hear about white nationalists again, too, which it's just insane, folks. But they're not going to stop. They're going to throw everything they've thrown at Trump in the past at him again.